Good morning, everyone. How are you guys doing today? How are you guys doing today? Hey, this is Gregory Wiles coming live to you from Houston, Texas, with this inspirational morning talk. For first-time listeners, I just come on right now. I'm trying to make it once a week. Tuesday is looking like the day it's going to be best for me to come on. So here I am, man, and delivering out a word. But today was one of those days I was going back and forth, back and forth. I was working too hard for this message because I want to do it. I enjoy doing this. So, but nothing wasn't coming. And I know that's when God's saying, okay, slow your roll down. I say, God, if you don't have anything for me to do today, that's fine. I go about my business because I know when you don't want me to do something, I don't have to work so hard for it. So, and then when I release that and say, hey, it's okay if you don't want me to say anything, I go in about my business, then he released the word. Because he just want me to keep me humble and keep me obedient, right? And understand, you're not doing this. I using you to do it. And that's where we got to stay humble in our gifts. He using us. And once we understand that, things can go well, it can go smooth, we can enjoy what we're doing. But once we trying to do, because he said there's a way that seems right to us, end up in death or destruction. So he wants us to be obedient. And that's what today's message is. It's about obedience and following instructions. And I'm entitled this one, God's provision may not meet our expectations. God's provision may not meet our expectations. If you want to direct God, how you want stuff to be done, how you want him to help you, you want to open yourself for disappointment. So his provisions does not meet our expectations, right? He'll provide for you in many different ways, in ways that doesn't make sense. But you got to keep your eye open. Once you asking him to help in whatever area or whatever you're praying for, you got to keep your eyes open. He could provide what you need from where you least expect it. All right, so let's look at this story here with Elijah. Elijah, right? And it's about the Elijah and the widow at Zarephath. Let's look at this story and see what we can get out of it that we could apply to our lives today, right? About obedience and following instructions, right? And how God provide in ways that we may not even think about or choose. He might do it in a way we don't even, it's not like our first choice, but he's going to do the things the way he want to do it. All right, so let's look. We're reading from 1 Kings 17. 1 Kings 17. I'm going to start here first. So now Elijah, the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. So Elijah is a prophet of God. Ahab was one of the most wicked kings in Israel. Remember, he was married to wicked Queen Jezebel and following her gods and lead all the people astray and worshiping other gods. So God had put in a punishment on the land right now. So he tell Elijah to go and tell Ahab, since y'all praying to this y'all own God, and thinking that's how y'all surviving, I'm going to stop this rain and show you who is God, who is the real God, and no rain or no dew not going to come except on my command. When I said it's going to fall again, right? So that's the message. Elijah went and delivered to the king. No rain going to fall. The land going to go into a famine, right? So, okay, he delivered that message. And let's see the instructions God gave Elijah now. This is 1 Kings 17:2. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, leave here, turn eastward and hide in Kerat Ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there. So, whoa. He tell him, giving Elijah some instructions. How you going to survive this famine? Because you in the land, don't think the famine not going to hit you. Because you in the land, right? But here how I can provide for you. You go the Kerat Ravine, east of the Jordan. The brook is a river. You can drink water from this river, and I can supply the ravens. I can tell the ravens to come and bring you food. Right? Now, you think if Elijah had a choice, he would let birds, depend on birds to come and feed him? Maxine Sampson, good morning. Good morning. How are you doing this morning? You think if he had a choice, he would want to depend on some birds for his provision? But it was not his choice. It was God's choice. So when he providing for us, we don't get to choose. We don't get to choose, right? I sure Elijah wouldn't want to put his life in the hands of some birds to come and feed him. So them birds don't make it now, right? But it's not our choice. We just got to be obedient. We got to be obedient when we get our instructions, even though if we do think it doesn't make sense, right? So he said, the birds going to feed, drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food. So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to Kerat Ravine, east of the Jordan, and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning. Brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. So these birds deliver. God tell him go. These birds bring the food that God tell him to bring, right? So now let's move on and see what happened. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Remember, God told them he didn't let no rain fall. So after a while, the river dried up where he was getting his water supply from. So God had given some more instructions, right? How much instructions we getting? We getting and we overlooking because it don't make sense. It don't make sense. And I know a lot of people, especially the A-type personality people, things got to make sense to them. If it don't make sense, they're not doing it. But this is not how the kingdom work. Everything ain't gonna make sense, but we gotta follow what he is saying. We gotta follow what he's saying, right? So sometime later, the brook dried up because they had no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him: go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. So now God's doing it's like testing Elijah to see if he can be faithful. Now, usually a widow back in those days was the poorest of people because they had no husband. I mean, they was married. A husband died of supplying them with, supplying the household with stuff. There's not a lot of jobs available to them. So that's why God had directed and tell people to take care of the widows, the poor, and the orphans and the widows, because usually those was not have enough. A lot back in the days, the husband died and, pretty much the breadwinner gone right here. And if they don't have any older sons, pretty much they used to be poor. So he telling Elijah, go and a widow gonna provide for you. So Elijah do what he said, right? Therefore, the region of Sidon there, I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. So when he went to Zarephath, he came to the town's gate. A widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? As she was going to get it, he called out, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. So she's saying, I have nothing, Elijah. I got some water. I could give you some water. Obviously, the water wasn't an issue for giving him a drink. But when he said he needs some food, she said, whoa. I ain't got no food. I barely got a little bit of flour and some olive oil, and I'm going to make a last little meal for me and my son, and we're going to die. Obviously, the son was of a young age, right? Then Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. It's not amazing how God always got to remind us when we are in our deepest of troubles, when we are in our famine, like how this land was in famine. He always got to remind us believers, do not be afraid. Trust me. Trust my word. I said the righteous shall not perish. Right? He always got to remind us, do not be afraid. In other words, do not let the circumstances overtake my word. Do not trust in your circumstances more than you trust in my word. Always got to remind us, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Okay? So let's see. Elisha said to her, do not be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. So you got to imagine, she gets the instructions. She don't even have enough for herself. And he telling her Make something, bring peace to me first. Bring peace to me first, and then when left over, you and your son eat. But this is the caveat. If you do that, the little flour and oil is gonna never run out. And you can got food each day, right? So we might be going through what we're going through, and we get these instructions here. And somebody might like, how much people is going to do this? The first thing, I don't even have enough for myself. I can share with you and give you first. I don't have enough for myself, and you're telling me the little I got, I must give it to you first. God's provisions most times does not match our expectations. And if we expecting God's provisions to match our expectations, we're opening ourselves to disappointment, and we're going to miss our blessing. When he leads you to do something, and you know as a believer, you know when it's being led, you got to learn to recognize God's voice. You do it no matter how crazy it sounds, you don't see. And that's the thing I've got with my son and teaching them, because they're young and you telling them certain things. If they don't see how those two things connect, like you play basketball, I'm going to tell them, okay, you want to be good there, you got to work at this at home. Practice doing this, listening, following instructions, or whatever it is at home, and it can help you to be a better player. It's like, that don't make sense. That don't make sense, Dad. You know, they don't see the connection. And because it don't make sense, and out of them, how I doing this at home is going to help me to be a better ball player. I'm dribbling and shooting at home, but he realizes more than that. And that's what happens to us a lot of times. God telling us to do something, but because we don't see how it connects to what we asking for, we tend to say it don't make sense, and we don't do it to miss our blessing, right? So don't wait for things to make sense. His provisions may not meet our expectations. Now look, birds have to provide for things. He wouldn't choose that. Then he tell him go to a widow who's the poorest in those things. She had to listen to him and trust him, that give him first a little bit. Trust what he said, the Lord said. And then everything start to flow from there, guys. It didn't make sense. Why I must give you a little bit first and then eat last, and then you're telling me I ain't got enough. But he wants us to live on him daily. And the biggest thing he have to remind us believers, this is not for the people out there. This is for the believers. Do not be afraid. Every time he can do them, before he do a miracle, every time before he do something great, he got to remind his people, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Ruth Sanchez, good morning. Good morning. Thanks for watching. He always got to remind us, do not be afraid. So let us take this away today, guys. Anytime we in our situation, anytime we hit the hard time, even in our best time, we got to remember, you hear his voice saying, do not be afraid. Trust my word. What my words say about it. Do not be afraid. He always got to remind us, right? So guys, you could go back and digest the story. It go on even further and talk when this woman's son had died and Elijah brought him back to life, all because they were obedient, all because both of them were in obedience to God. God even performed a further miracle for her because she was in obedience. Let me see. Then she went away. Let me see if I can hit that quickly. It come on my mind to hit it quickly. It might shed some more light for some people. She went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. Sometime later, the son of the woman who had owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse, and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" "Give me your son," Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "Lord, my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I'm staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "Lord, my God, Let this boy life return to him. The Lord heard Elisha's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elisha picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." Then the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is true." I don't know why you lead me to read that. That might help someone who have another issue praying for sickness. He just lead me to read it out. So if whoever this is who praying for some type of sickness, the instructions is do not be afraid and obey whatever instructions you get in. Do not be afraid, right, guys? So go back and look at this. This is in 1 Kings 17, and you can read this story and digest it. But God's provision may not always meet our expectation. All right, guys, I'm going to leave that here. Have a great, great day, and we can see each other again soon. Goodbye. Roger Hamilton, good morning, sir. Good morning.